Yes, sir. How we doing, baby? This is AC Radio. I'm your host, Adam Caplan, and sheesh, do we have plenty to talk about today. I mean, UFC 274, Bivol versus Canelo, a little bit of AC's preach at the end. This is going to be an action-packed show, so we're going to get right into it. First things first, we've got Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol at the light heavyweight division, 174 pounds. Canelo is originally the undisputed champion in the super middleweight division, which is at 168. And now he's moved up to fight Dimitri Bivol, who's a WBA world champion. And Canelo stepped up to 174 pounds. And let's just say Canelo had his work cut out for him. I mean, Bivol is a tactician, knows how to control the ring, keeps his hands in tight. He's got that right hand glued to the right side of his face, and that posed some difficulties for Canelo. Canelo likes to throw that lead left hook, likes to throw powerful single shots, and you could clearly see how he was having trouble landing those shots in the fight. And, the judges scored it 115 to 113, which is a lot closer than most of us gave it. I actually didn't think Canelo won many rounds. I think at most I would give him 4 rounds. Some are even as critical as giving him 2 rounds. So credit to Dimitri Bivol. That's a tough one to pronounce, ladies and gentlemen. Credit to Bivol. I mean, he went out there, stuck to the game plan, didn't get caught up in the moment in fighting a megastar like Canelo, and absolutely stuck to his guns, stuck to his game plan. Canelo was punching arms the whole evening. He was throwing single shots. He was chasing that lead left hook. He was chasing that right hook to the body. And all he was catching was Bivol's right forearm and also Bivol's left elbow with that right hook to the body. And, I've got a couple of theories about it. I do think that obviously the weight difference did play a factor. I mean, the last time we did see Canelo move up to light heavyweight was against an aged Sergey Kovalev. And now he moved up to go and fight Bivol, who's completely in his prime and is a world champion. And you definitely saw how that fared against Canelo. Now, he does say that he got a little bit tired towards the end, but I would definitely say that you could see in the beginning stages of the round that he had his work cut out for him. I do think that Canelo needed to utilize a little bit more speed, a little bit more combinations instead of chasing those single powerful shots that he is so famous for. And I think that sometimes when you pose the same game plan but expect the same result, it's not always going to fare, especially against some of these heavier fighters. And we spoke about that last week regarding the Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano fight. When the men move up a weight class, the expectations of them doing well if they're a megastar is obviously quite high, but on the reality, we always see how moving up a weight class then catches up to some of these fighters. And that was certainly the case for Canelo, a lot more than it was for Amanda Serrano. So, Bivol went out there, kept his hands held tight, stayed calm the entire time, was popping his jabs. He completely beat Canelo with the purest form of the fundamentals of the sweet science. Hands in tight, popping the jab, remaining calm, not getting caught up in the moment. So, there's really not much to talk about on the fight because Bivol did exactly what he needed to do to beat Canelo. And, folks are wondering what's next for Canelo. Well, come on. We saw it in the Triple G fight. He wants the rematch after the draw. The rematch is obviously the next case scenario. I don't see Canelo moving back down to 168 pounds. I really don't see anybody there challenging him enough or giving him enough of an interest to get up for. So you could expect Canelo to sign on that dotted line again, Bivol to sign on that dotted line again, and they're going to be getting this fight going on again. And I love this. I love this for multiple reasons. I mean, first of all, Canelo was calling out the likes of Arthur Beterbiev, Alexander Usyk, and even, a couple of cruiserweight champions. Now, what bothered me about that scenario is that, at Canelo weighing, probably walking it around at around 180 pounds and also being 5'9", the heavier and the higher up in the weight classes you're going to go, the bigger and taller these fighters are going to be. Now, the fact that he was stopped in his tracks yesterday is actually a gift from God. And the reason that is that when we saw Canelo fight against Floyd Mayweather and have a very difficult time, he came back and looked absolutely better than ever. And that loss to Floyd Mayweather has carried him to being at least number 1 or number 2 in the pound for pound division. And, you know, even the draw against Triple G, we saw that he was immediately able to make those adjustments. You know, against Triple G, the first time he had his back up against the ropes. He wasn't chasing as much. To be honest, he had a very similar game plan against Bivol. And what did Canelo do in Triple G Canelo number 2? He took the center of the ring and told Triple G, you are going to meet me right here and we are going to fight it out. And I expect Canelo to take a similar approach in the rematch against Bivol. So, you know, although it is a blemish, although it is a loss, you know, Canelo has been in the game for so long and still has so much ahead of him that this loss is actually only going to benefit him even more. And if we thought that Canelo wasn't capable of getting any better or any bigger as a superstar and a fighter, now is the time where he is absolutely going to show us what he is made of. So, you know, pressure makes diamonds. Losses are important in the fight game. I really wish that we would get out of this era or this mindset of thinking that a loss or a couple of losses on the records now dictates that the fighter is no longer capable of remaining an undisputed champion or a pound-for-pound great. I think that it's enough already. I think that the sport has evolved so much in boxing and mixed martial arts that having blemishes and losses on the record shouldn't be that big of a deal. And we are going to see in the rematch with Bivol and Canelo what type of adjustments are made. I think that Canelo has a lot more work to do on his end in terms of the game plan versus Bivol. But I think what Dimitri Bivol has more to worry about is how much he's getting paid and, you know, how he will then be viewed as the A side. Because, you know, what was a little bit interesting is the fact that Canelo was the one who walked out second, even though he was challenging for the title. But you know those Russians, cold-hearted, calculated, no fucks given. He didn't care that he had to walk out first. All he wanted to make sure of was that he walked away with his hand raised, and that's exactly what happened. Credit to Dimitri Bivol, credit to Canelo. I can't wait for the rematch. And, you know, if we thought that Canelo was already at his peak or his ceiling of greatness, I think that there's a lot more to be seen, ladies and gentlemen. So, you know, keep your eyes peeled on Canelo Alvarez. Keep your eyes peeled on Dimitri Bivol, because the rematch is going to be bigger than ever. It's going to be an action-packed fight, and I think that Canelo is going to bring a different pace, a different tactic, and a different tenacity into the fight. And I'm just really hoping that we're going to see a little bit more speed from Canelo, a little bit more combinations, and I'd like to see him cut off the ring a little bit more. You know, he's walking down his fighters with absolutely no respect, throwing single shots. And after a while, when you start to get in there with the best of the best, you realize that that is absolutely not enough. So again, credit to Dimitri Bivol, you know, retains his belt, looking like he's going to set up the rematch, which, you know, should solidify him and his family for the rest of his life, which is obviously something we always like to see. And, you know Canelo Alvarez, he's going to be back better than ever. I think that it's going to also give his body a little bit more time to adjust to the weight class. You know, people think that just because Canelo had to cut less weight, that it wouldn't pose any difficulties cardiovascular-wise or tactics-wise, but it absolutely does. So I think that more time in the gym, sparring heavier fighters, sparring bigger fighters, and also on the fitness and nutrition side, you know, getting his strength right, getting the calories back in him is definitely going to help Canelo in the rematch. So credit to DAZN. You know, we had Jake Paul telling Eddie Hearn to suck his dick and go fuck himself because Canelo lost. And he was also promising us that the Canelo-Jake Paul fight is going to happen. We'll see about that. For now, we got bigger business to focus on. Bivol Canelo 2, hopefully in Las Vegas, maybe even Dallas Cowboy Stadium with 100,000 people. And, you know, I just absolutely can't wait for the rematch. And I can't wait to see the adjustments that Canelo Alvarez is going to make. And you guys obviously know why I have a little bit of a soft spot for him. I mean, you know, you could obviously tell that we share some traits. And, I'm looking forward to the rematch. Now, it doesn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. I was a busy, busy man this weekend. I was watching Samurai MMA, a local Quebec professional MMA circuit. I was watching I was watching Bellator. I was watching the UFC, and I was also watching Canelo and Bivol on DAZN. So, if you can't tell why I don't have my hair done and I got my sweatshirt on today, I'm keeping it casual because there's been a couple of late nights this weekend because I'm trying to provide you all the best content as possible. So, let's get a little bit of pineapple in us and let's talk UFC 274. I mean, sad news. Donald Cerrone wasn't able to fight Joe Lozon on the opening fight on the main card. But Chaos Williams and Randy Brown definitely did their thing. Congrats to Randy Brown on a close split decision victory. And, a little bit of a lackluster fight followed by that. Mauricio Shogun Hua versus Auvin St. Preux. But we got to get to the juice here. Let's get into the real meat and potatoes. Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. We saw old elements of Tony Ferguson in the press conferences, and we definitely saw old elements of Tony Ferguson in the octagon against Michael Chandler. Now, I gave Tony Ferguson that first round. I thought that minus the takedown, that beautiful double leg takedown by Michael Chandler, he took down Tony Ferguson like a bouncer at a nightclub, completely smoked him, brought him back to the ground. But, let's scale back a little bit. Seemed as if the Chandler was a little bit stunned by the unorthodox strikes that were getting thrown at him by Tony Ferguson. At some points when Tony Ferguson was countering or was initiating the strikes, it was even hard as a viewer to tell whether he was throwing it with his fist or he was landing it with his elbow. Now, Michael Chandler's biggest issue as of lately is how he fights fire with fire. And you could start to see that Tony Ferguson was sucking him into that type of matchup until it clicked. I'm a Division I wrestler from the University of Missouri. I'm going to double leg the shit out of this guy. And that's exactly what he did. Now, prior to that, though, you could definitely see that Tony Ferguson was controlling the fight, was catching Michael Chandler in the moment. But, finally, Michael Chandler didn't decide to fight fire with fire. Instead, he decided to pour a little bit of ice on Tony Ferguson and take him the fuck down. So, first round, close round, but still had to give it to Tony Ferguson. And then in that second round, 15 seconds in, out of nowhere, Michael Chandler lands a front kick that completely shuts the power off in Tony Ferguson. And it was scary to see. I mean, Tony definitely fell from the highest point that he could have and landed completely on top of his head. He had his legs crossed. His eyes were wide open, but there was nowhere to be seen in his mind. He was completely out cold. And what did Michael Chandler do? He celebrated with 5 beautiful backflips, brought his son into the ring, shed a few tears, and then also cut a fantastic, fantastic promo. And I was telling Brett before the show, Michael Chandler gets it. He doesn't let the UFC dictate his future and his career. He goes out there, finishes fights, or puts on emphatic performances, and then builds a pure path on where he wants to go next. Who his next opponent is, or who his next opponents will be. And, he's chasing that bag through and through. So I love the fact that Michael Chandler doesn't only focus on his performance in the octagon, but he also foresees where he wants to go afterwards. He is always thinking 1 to 2 steps ahead when he's fighting and when the fight is done. And that's why I love having Michael Chandler in the UFC. Tony Ferguson was crying for Dana White privilege. I disagree. I think that Michael Chandler is not going to let the UFC brass dictate the future of his career. He is chasing accomplishments, he is chasing titles, and he is chasing that bag. Credit to Michael Chandler, a beautiful front kick, notes of Anderson Silva in there, which is unbelievable because we're talking about a Division I wrestler, and Anderson Silva is one of the best kickboxers or Muay Thai fighters that we have ever seen in the UFC's legacy. So, completely shut the lights off. Obviously, Michael Chandler called out 3 people, the winner of Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje, or Mr. Red Panty himself, Conor McGregor. So it'll be interesting to see what the future will have in store for Michael Chandler, for Conor McGregor, and also Charlie Olives that we're going to talk about a little bit after. Now, going to keep it a little short about Rose versus Carla Esparza. I mean, to be honest here, there really wasn't much action. Seemed as if there was a lack of understanding with Rose and her coaches. You know, Trevor Whitman and Pat Barry seemed to believe that Rose was controlling and winning that fight, and the judges decided otherwise. And, you know, I don't disagree with the judge's decision. I think that Carla Esparza utilized her wrestling, utilized a little bit of that clinch, and on top of that, Rose didn't really want to engage that much. So, you know, there's not really much there to talk about in the fight. I think that Rose thought she won due to the fact that perhaps you should give the champion the benefit of the doubt, but you know, there's a difference between the benefit of the doubt and just pure inactivity. So credit to Carla Esparza, you know, went in there, didn't necessarily pose as much activeness as Rose, but the takedowns do count. The takedowns do score. And, you know, she's getting married next week. She's now, again, the UFC champion. So congratulations to Carla Esparza. But again, not really much to talk about there. I certainly don't see a rematch happening. I think that, you know, tough-ass ladies like Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Zhang Weili are going to be waiting in the wings. And those are fights that are definitely going to be interesting to watch. Also felt that when Rose was walking to the ring and was chanting her "I'm the best," didn't feel like she had the same confidence and the same impact when she's done it in the past. You know, I don't know if perhaps also having Justin Gaethje in the main event does add to the moment a little bit much, or most probably the fact that she lost to Carla Esparza for the Ultimate Fighter finale that also then made her the champion. So, you know, I don't really know if it's a matter of trying to, you know, erase history and get that win back, and that was just too much pressure, or, you know, like Canelo, sometimes every dog has its day. So, you know, that's all I really got for you on the Rose and Carla Esparza thing. But lastly, we got to talk about the main event. We got Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje, the UFC's lightweight championship. And there was a lot of controversy there. I mean, Charlie Olives, first of all, missed weight by 0.5 pounds. As soon as the fight started, he was immediately stripped of his championship. The belt was vacated, and the only person on the evening who was capable of winning that belt was Justin Gaethje. But should Charlie Olives win, he would then be the number one contender for the vacant title. And that's exactly what happened. I was talking to a few people on Twitter Spaces on Friday, and that was a lot of fun, by the way. Loved hopping on the Twitter Spaces. Just felt a little bit more casual. You know, when I'm in the zone on this podcast, I'm moving a million miles a minute. I'm looking to provide the fastest and most informative content for y'all. But on the Twitter Spaces, you're able to take your time a little bit more, and you're also interacting with folks that are chiming in and out of the app. And that just builds a lot more dialogue. And, you know, we're looking forward to having guests on AC Radio. This is definitely going to happen. My man Brett bought a mic, so now I don't have to dip into my pocket, so I appreciate him. I might have to roll up to his studio and spit out a couple of bars. Probably not, but I think I go fast enough on AC Radio. What do y'all think? Now, you know, I was talking to a couple people on Twitter Spaces, and I said the way that Justin Gaethje closes the distance with his boxing is a little bit too rushed and a little bit too much on the inside, where Charlie Olives is then going to utilize that Muay Thai clinch and drill those knees to the rib cage. And, you know, we definitely saw that in the first round. Now, granted, Justin did light up Charlie a few times, knocked him down on his ass, but Charles Oliveira was showing some notes of Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor too, where as he's getting hit, he also thought it would be a great opportunity to perhaps pull guard, baiting Justin Gaethje in to try to jump on top of him and finish the fight by ground and pound. But Justin was smarter than that. I mean, he said, no, you're going to get up and we're going to fight this out. And, you know, yeah, that was obviously the right move to do. But listen, the knees to the body was definitely a factor. And Charles Oliveira landed that right hand multiple times that stunned Justin Gaethje. And then we definitely saw later in that first round, or about the middle of the first round, once Justin seemed to be a little bit out on his feet and the fight was then taken to the ground, you saw right away that we've seen it in the Khabib fight, and we also saw it now last night on Saturday night that, once Justin gets to the ground, it's not going to fare well for him. And people are wondering, why is it that Justin's jiu-jitsu or grappling isn't that great considering he's a wrestler? Listen, what people don't understand is that you could be good at boxing, good at kickboxing, good at wrestling, and good at jiu-jitsu, but if you don't know how to tie it all together like a Khabib, like a John Jones, like a George St. Pierre, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to show those other skill sets of yourself. And that is one of the things that Justin Gaethje has had a big problem with, not being able to tie in all the facets of mixed martial arts together, number one, and number two, patience. Every single time we watch Justin Gaethje fight, it looks as if he wants it over before it even started. And it's not because he's scared, it's actually because he's a maniac. He loves the chaos, he loves the explosion, he loves the earthquake. But you could obviously see as he's fighting that top level competition that it is working against him. And it is frustrating to watch because he's such a beautiful striker to watch. I mean, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje was a clinic. Tony Ferguson was hit way too many times in such a smooth, technical manner. But, when we see him get in there with Khabib, when we see him get in there with Oliveira, there's just such a rush to him that I wish that he would be able to slow down. And, that's my thoughts on Justin Gaethje, is I wish that he had a little bit more patience to him. He likes to blow things up too quickly. Let's start with a small bonfire first before we think about nuking something. So that was a little bit frustrating, but the real credit, in my opinion, goes to Charles Oliveira. Misses weight by half a pound, number one, has to give up a percentage of his purse, and also has to vacate the belt, but still goes out there and puts on a performance of a lifetime against a fantastic fighter in Justin Gaethje. All of those obstacles, losing your belt, losing a little bit of money, and missing weight, those are all key factors for somebody to want to just pack their bag and go back to the hotel room and say, fuck this. But what did Charles Oliveira do? He brought the fight to Justin Gaethje. The Muay Thai clinch was on point. He was landing that right hand. And then the next thing you know, he had Justin Gaethje wrapped up like an anaconda in a rear naked choke. And that was all she wrote. So credit to Charles Oliveira, who jumped out of the octagon and actually looked at Dana White and begged him to make him the champion of the fight. And Dana said, listen, man, you missed weight. You're the number one contender on the next fight. And, the rules are the rules. You got to make weight. Would have loved to see him try to shave his head. Would have loved to try to see him shave his legs, maybe even cut his toenails a bit more, by any means necessary to get that half pound. A couple of people were joking online that maybe Charles Oliveira just needed to go and make a number two in the bathroom. Listen, guys, when you're that dehydrated, there ain't nothing you're pushing out of your system. Okay, especially at the fact that he's probably had to cut out a lot more calories than Justin Gaethje did, due to the fact that he's such a long and lean fighter. He's so tall and he's got that muscle on him. So it's a lot more difficult for him to get that weight cut. And always something for me that is a bad sign is when a fighter is wearing sunglasses to the press conference. It's for swag. Yeah, it's for style, but it's also to not show your opponent how sunken in your eyeballs are. And we see that in Devinson Figueiredo as well. And, they're just similar in the sense that they are very big for their division. If Dustin Poirier is talking about maybe perhaps moving to 170, imagine how Charles Oliveira feels, ladies and gentlemen. So, with all the odds stacked against him, with missing weight, giving up a percentage of his purse, and then also vacating the belt, it's just so fantastic to see how mentally strong the Bronx is. Okay, it is just so fantastic to see. He had all of the opportunities to pack his bag and go home and let Justin Gaethje be the world champion of the world, and that didn't happen. Now, another thing got brought up after Oliveira won. Mr. Red Panty again, Conor McGregor, gets brought up. He was a very, very popular guy on the night last night. And, I definitely like the fact that the likes of Chandler and Oliveira were calling out Conor McGregor, because, you know, we have heard inklings of Leon Edwards stepping out against Kamaru Usman so that Conor McGregor could step in at welterweight. That's not the matchup to make. Usman is too big. His wrestling is too strong. And even on the feed, Usman, you know, shut the lights out of Jorge Masvidal. I would hate to see that in Conor McGregor. And especially Conor being 1-4 in his last 5 fights, only beating Donald Cerrone. I definitely don't think that fighting one of the top 5 pound-for-pound best fighters in the UFC is a wise move to do in fighting Kamaru Usman. Now, Michael Chandler, on the other hand, Charles Oliveira, on the other hand, those are fights to make. But again, why do we always have to throw Conor right into the deep end? Why can't he get a warm-up fight? Why can't he fight a guy who's on the lower end of the top 10? Why can't we set up Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor? I mean, Conor was going at Tony all night, you know, because Tony got famous. One of Tony's famous lines is calling Conor McGregor McNuggets. And, you know, Conor McGregor was all over Twitter where he cropped a picture of what Tony Ferguson's face looked like during that front kick from Michael Chandler, which, you know, by the way, Tony Ferguson got turned into a Bored Ape NFT with the way that his face had changed from that front kick. Now, I don't know if that was an edit or not, but he certainly looked like a Bored Ape. And, you know, Conor McGregor was then making fun of Tony Ferguson, calling him McNuggets, telling everyone how Conor likes to dip his McNuggets in a little bit of barbecue and curry sauce. And, you know, that's a fight that we want to see. I mean, it is tough to want to see Tony Ferguson fight after all the damage he's taken in his last few fights. But should he want to sign on the dotted line again, I don't see why they shouldn't set up Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor. That to me doesn't make any sense. And then on the other hand, Michael Chandler, listen, that's a tough matchup for Conor McGregor, you know, in the wrestling sense. He's a bigger, faster, better version of a Chad Mendes. And we did see the struggles that Conor had earlier in his career against the likes of Chad Mendes. And you could expect something similar to happen with the likes of Michael Chandler, unless Michael Chandler decides to fight fire with fire again. That could pose big issues, because I'm not sure if Michael Chandler could survive the devastating touch of death of Conor McGregor with that left hand. I'm not sure if he could. But if he's going to fight a smart matchup, focus on his wrestling and focus on his strikes, then, you know, that could pose for a different evening. But, you know, if he's going to go in there and try to fight fire with fire against the notorious one, it might be a long night for Michael Chandler. So I'd love to see Conor McGregor versus the likes of Michael Chandler or Tony Ferguson next. Not Charles Oliveira, not the name is escaping me, not Charles Oliveira, and, you know, yeah, not Charles Oliveira. I don't want it happening. I don't think that should be the next fight. I don't like the fact that Conor has to run in there and immediately get a title shot. But who will then Charles Oliveira fight next? I mean, hey, to me, Conor McGregor versus Tony Ferguson is the fight to make. Charlie Olives versus Michael Chandler is another fight to make, because again, that was a close fight. And this is something that Charles Oliveira has kind of showed in his last few fights, is that he does get tagged, he does get hurt, but he always bounces back and he always then finishes the fight. So just a relentless, persistent fighter who knows how to stay at the top in Charles Oliveira. So let's do it. Let's get Charlie Olives versus Michael Chandler, Conor McGregor versus Tony Ferguson. Let's cut the welterweight chat. I'm happy that you feel as big as a refrigerator in the Lamborghini super yacht, but this is the fight to make, ladies and gentlemen. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, followed by Conor McGregor and Tony Ferguson on the same night, on the same card. And, you know, if you are watching the fights this weekend, I hope you enjoyed them. I hope that you are letting this all marinate and you're thinking about the future matchups that could happen, because that UFC's lightweight division is just getting bigger, and better. And it's funny to see, considering the UFC featherweight division is, you know, having Volkanovski versus Holloway again. So, you know what? Comment below what your thoughts are on Max Holloway versus Alexander Volkanovski again. So it's been a minute. It's been a slice. Thanks for tuning in to AC Radio. We're out.